Hello, and welcome to my second franchise review. It's been a while, well, at least since the first one back in February. This time I will be reviewing Monty Python. I have some experience with Monty Python since my father is a fan and showed me and my family the wafer thin mint sketch, if you know, you know, after we were absolutely stuffed from a buffet. I'll only be reviewing the 5 films listed in their filmography on Wikipedia, not all their TV shows. They're on Netflix, I believe, since that would take a long time, quite a long time. And I've got a few other sketch comedy TV shows to catch up on as well, including Kids in the Hall, which came out in I believe, the 80s or the 90s, and Tall Boys, which is coming out right now. I believe it's maybe just finished its 3rd season. That one is available on CBC and CBC Gem in Canada only. I don't know where it's available elsewhere. If you want to check it out, you probably will need a VPN and connect it to Canada in order to check it out. Without further ado, let's start with the first film that they released, and now for something completely different. More than 40 skits, animated shorts, and interludes are included in this big screen incarnation of the popular British television program, Monty Python's Flying Circus. The narrator guides the audience through absurd segments about such diverse subjects as cannibal babies, killer cats, and dead parrots. Although the skits were originally produced for television, the film contains alternate versions that were remade without a studio audience. This is available for streaming on Netflix in Canada or rent or purchase in the US. There were probably about half of these sketches that I at least somewhat enjoyed. The rest were just okay for me. The ones I enjoyed the most were How Not to Be Seen, Self-Defense Against Fresh Fruit, The Colonel's Warning, Kilimanjaro Expedition, The Funniest Joke in the World, People Falling Out of High Buildings, and Vocational Guidance Counselor. There were others that I at least somewhat was okay with, but I just didn't enjoy them as much as the sketches that I mentioned before. The animated segments were among my least favorite. I will say that I really did enjoy how they were able to make some of the sketches tie in to each other. So you'd have one sketch lead into another. That was really interesting. And I don't know that they would have done that in the TV show, trying to keep sketches a little bit more separate. I also realized while watching this film that I quite enjoy dark humor. I didn't realize how much I did, but a lot of the sketches that I mentioned were dark humor, especially How Not to Be Seen, Self-Defense Against Fresh Fruit, and the people falling out of high buildings. I think The Funniest Joke in the World might also be a little bit dark for some people, but it was a fun-ish, it was at least funny sketch, is how I should put it. Now let's move on to their full-length scripted sketch type thing. I guess it's more considered a film than the previous one and one of the future ones that I'm going to be mentioning, and I think probably the other one as well. But anyways, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, a comedic send-up of the grim circumstances of the Middle Ages as told through the story of King Arthur and framed by a modern-day murder investigation. When the mythical king of the Britons leads his knights on a quest for the Holy Grail, they face a wide array of horrors, including a persistent black knight, a three-headed giant, a cotter of shrubbery-challenged knights, the perilous castle anthrax, a killer rabbit, a house of virgins, and a handful of rude Frenchmen. This film is available for streaming on Netflix in Canada and the US. This started out quite promising, with unique comic lines below and incorporated into the opening credits. I want to include a PSA that there is an epilepsy warning for the end of the opening credits. If you have any issue with flashing lights, I would recommend either skipping the opening credits entirely or skipping at least that part of the opening credits, or do whatever you would usually do when you have scenes of flashing lights. Overall, I'm surprised by how much this didn't really make me laugh compared to their previous film, and now for something completely different. Only a couple bits worked for me. Flesh Wound, which is something that kind of emerged outside of this film and got a little bit popularized. So I did know vaguely of it, not the entire sketch, but just a piece of it. And the Frenchman insults, which again, somewhat extended outside of this film, but I still found there was a lot more in this film that I didn't know about. And the Killer Rabbits section, that one is also dark humor. Again, more dark humor that I enjoyed. Other than that, I was pretty bored. There was a great triumphant score though, so you know, if you're looking for a good score, this one would be a great one to check out. I know this opinion is quite controversial because quite a lot of people enjoy this film, but I am part of the small minority that just didn't really enjoy it. Now, if you don't like that opinion, I don't know, try to convince me to like it more. Just post in the comments why you like it and what maybe I was missing from this movie. But please be kind, don't be rude when criticizing my opinion, or at least trying to get me to enjoy the film, because the more you criticize my opinion and my lack of saying maybe I didn't understand it, the less I'm going to want to like something. Now let's move on to something that was part of my Criterion challenge for this year, the fifth one that I've watched for it, Monty Python's Life of Brian. This was specifically for the out-of-print physical release category. A young man, Brian, who was born one stable down and on the same night as Jesus, becomes intrigued by a young rebel, Judith. To try to impress her, Brian joins the independence movement against the Romans, the People's Front of Judea. However, in an attempt to hide from the Romans, he relays some of the teachings he heard from Jesus, which ends up spurring a crowd to believe he is the Messiah. While trying to get rid of his followers and reunite with Judith, he embarks on several misadventures. This is available for streaming on Netflix in Canada and the US. I thought this had a great opening scene and opening credits. The first third was also pretty good, with Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and people's misinterpretation of it the further they were from him. The stoning, where women would show up in these fake beards and they would have to kind of disguise themselves as men, and including their voice, and the Colosseum, which had quite a few bits that I enjoyed, were the best three of this entire film. After the Colosseum, I felt it hit a bit of a lull that it didn't really recover from until the very end, with Brian's forced martyrdom, the entrance of the Judean People's Front, and the group singing Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, which I may have just watched this film recently, but it's still played in my head quite a bit after watching it. I really enjoyed that song, but again, it was not enough to, I would say, redeem the middle section of this film that was not up to par with the beginning or this very end. I'd also like to mention that there is a quite progressive moment where one of the characters transitions from male to female, and people generally accept it. So that's something that this film came out with that maybe people wouldn't have thought about back in the 1970s. Now let's move on to the live performance at the Hollywood Bowl, Monty Python's Live at the Hollywood Bowl. New and classic sketches and songs by the British comedy troupe are performed at the Hollywood Bowl. Two short films from the 1972 special, Monty Python's Fleegender Circus, are also added. The series of sketches and songs parodies such mundane subjects as musical numbers, fairy tales, philosophers, conversations, and masculinity. Performances include The Last Supper, Silly Olympics, Bishop and on the Landing, The Lumberjack Song, and For Yorkshiremen. This live show is available for streaming on Netflix in Canada and the US. There were some great bits in this, like Colin Bomber Harris, where he fights himself, The Last Supper, Silly Olympics was one of my favorites of this film, Bruce's Philosopher Song, The Ministry of Silly Walks, another really great one, Crunchy Frog, one of my, I believe, second favorites, Albatross, which was a really good one, The Argument Sketch, Travel Agency. It was specifically the moment where he's going through the audience, where it kind of devolves into insanity, and the comedy lecture. My biggest problem was the use of racial slurs in Never Be Rude to an Arab and Yellowface in the World Forum sketch. It wasn't nonstop laughs, but there was a decent amount to enjoy. Now let's move on to the final film that is listed on their filmography, Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. The stages of life are told through multiple sketches and songs by the British comedy troupe. The 7 parts of life cover birth, growing up, war, middle age, organ transplants, old age, and death. Added are 3 unrelated skits placed in the beginning, middle, and end. This is available for rent or purchase in Canada or the US, so not available on Netflix like the previous ones are available all in Canada, or like the last 3 were available in the US. For me, this one was the most enjoyable, with sketch after sketch leading through the life cycle. First, we had 16 and a half minutes of a pre-show that had some action and comedy, and even though I enjoyed it, I didn't see much of a reason for it to be there. Moving into the feature presentation, we start with the miracle of birth, with doctors just wanting to impress the administration who knows nothing of medical procedures, and then the song Every Sperm is Sacred, lampooning the Catholic Church's opposition to contraceptives, hit home by a Protestant man's disapproval of the Catholic couple and family, and pride in the ability to use contraceptives, even though he doesn't actually do so. Moving on to growth and learning with the sex education lesson. We have a lot of, kind of potentially cringy moments, but it's quite hilarious that this is how this sex education lesson was taught, and very different than sex education lessons in reality. Then we have fighting each other with 3 sketches, 2 of which I really enjoyed. The soldiers gifting the officer while he tries to rally them for an attack, and the major asking his platoon what they'd rather do than drill practice. I didn't really enjoy the 3rd sketch and how they portrayed the Zulu people. Then I'm going to skip over the next sketch that they had in, I believe it was middle age, just because it was fine, but it wasn't anything too huge of a comedy masterpiece, I would say. So then we have, within that same section, live organ transplants, which was fun, although, again, it's a dark humor sketch. So, from the previous ones, that's the kind of type of thing that I enjoyed the most. Although this one, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it the most of this film. I think a lot of it was pretty good, pretty okay. Oh no, the pre-show has invaded the show, and then it disappears. And moves on to the autumn years. This is where we have the Wafer Thin Mint sketch, which is gross out humor. And if you don't like that type of stuff, I would say skip this whole segment, because this is not going to be for you. I am not a huge fan of gross out humor anymore, so this was not really for me. But I could see some people enjoying it. And back when I was a kid, I think I somewhat enjoyed it, maybe cringed quite a little bit, because it is gross. We then have a pretty strong ending with death, specifically the Grim Reaper sketch, and then the end of the film where they read the meaning of life to it, which is to
try and be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book every now and then, get some walking in, and try and live together in peace and harmony with people of all creeds and nations.
Now that I've finished all the reviews for each of these films, let's move on to the ranking I would have for these films. At number 5 is Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I rated a 2.5 out of 5. At number 4, we have Life of Brian, which I rated a 3 out of 5. At number 3, we have Live at the Hollywood Bowl, which I didn't rate because I generally don't rate live performances. I have rated some in the past, like Hamilton and Come From Away, but generally speaking, I don't rate live performances. And this is a comedy show. I don't rate comedy specials. So it's one of those things that I kind of lumped it in with that. But you could probably say I gave it a 3 out of 5. At number 2, we have And Now for Something Completely Different, which I rated a 3 out of 5. Again, I wasn't really thinking at the beginning of this that this would be one of the highest ranking. This was quite a surprise for me. And at number 1, we have The Meaning of Life, which I rated a 3.5 out of 5. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any suggestions or information you'd like to share, please leave a comment down below. If you have anything you can let me know maybe about why you like Monty Python so much, and maybe if I should check out their TV shows and put that a little bit higher on my list of things to just put on a couple times. You know, I do still watch TV. I just don't review it as much as I could, just because it's a lot of stuff to cover. It's a very different way to review TV compared to film. It's just, it's a bit of a hassle. So I may check it out. If you tell me that the actual TV show is really good, which I mean, the other the sketch films that they had, I actually appreciated a lot more than the ones where they did a long form sketch. I think some of it has to do with, at least with a sketch show, it's a short form of comedy, whereas a long film, it's just, you get kind of exhausted with the same sketch type exaggeration in a feature length 90-minute one continuous sketch type of thing. If you would like to see more from me, hit the subscribe button. For the next video, I will probably be doing a Wes Anderson director review, which I wanted to do in March, but I pushed it back to focus more on women creators and stories for Women's History Month. Word of warning, it may take a while since there are 9 films, and I have seen a few of them. I think actually maybe only one of his films, but I will try to truncate that schedule a little bit. I'll try to get it out next week. It may not actually happen, but I will try to get that to work out. It may be a couple weeks from now. I will really try to get it out for you next week. And I'll be working away from home. I have a job outside of my house, and that means that I will have to watch on my laptop, which I didn't really want to do, but I'll have to do that while I'm away, and I won't have access to a TV. Usually I'd watch things on a fairly big screen, 40 inches, but sometimes I have watched these things on my laptop and just not cued you in on that. Thank you again for watching, and have a great April Fool's Day.